There are things we can do, or not do, that are good for our mind and help us to be mentally healthy. We wanted to outline some of the practical things we can all do to make our mind happier. I've never been much interested with how my knee or my spleen works, but I'm fascinated by how my mind does. Why do I sometimes get nervous before I give a speech, but other times I don't? Why am I sometimes powerless to control my anxious thoughts, while other times I can distract my mind away from them and they fade into the background? Why do I get the feeling that I can trust some people and not others? Is that feeling reliable or not? One of the biggest things I've learned from talking to Ian is that those things that arise in our mind, thoughts, feelings, hope, anxiety, anger, depression, and the rest, are not just about our mind. They're also about our body. Anxiety can cause our heart to race. Depression can make us feel so heavy that we can't get out of bed. We are not a separate mind and a body. We're one connected mind-body. Another thing I've learned is that we can change. In the old days, if someone, my wife Lucy, said, "You're pretty impatient," you used to be able to get away with, "Well, that's just the way I am, can't do nothing about it, sorry." Now that we know more about our mind's ability to change, that excuse doesn't cut it anymore. There are strategies we can use to become less impatient. There are others that help us become less pessimistic, or that raise our self-esteem, or help us control our temper, or even reduce our control freak tendencies and help us learn to give up the remote control. These sorts of changes aren't easy, rats, and they can take a while, which is a challenge for those of us who are impatient. But it can be done. Over time, we can tune up our mind and make it even better at helping us stumble through life.
In late 2000, I was fortunate enough to be appointed the inaugural CEO of Beyond Blue, the National Depression Initiative. Having moved to Melbourne to take up this fabulous opportunity courtesy of the Victorian and federal governments, and led by the mercurial ex-Premier Jeff Kennett, my principal task was to engage in a national but informed conversation about common mental health problems. To do that, you need to have at least two parties who were seriously interested. A megaphone of dull public health messages was never likely to work. At the time, I was very fortunate that people like James, with the support of the ABC, were prepared to do just that. Talk seriously and openly about mental health, what it is, how to build it, and how to manage common problems if they arise. But without being too serious, overly technical, or just plain boring. Some were a lot better at it than others. James has a unique capacity to raise a serious or just really interesting topic, reflect on it personally, and then ask the sort of questions that really matter to the wider audience. During the COVID period, mental health concerns came screaming back into the public domain. I found myself repeating many short messages about the importance of taking care of our collective mental health in continuing rounds of media engagements. But I was frustrated at the lack of opportunity to have longer and more informative conversations with those outside the professional and social networks that I inhabit. So when James suggested that podcasts were now the best way to pursue those goals, I jumped at the opportunity. The podcast has been much more successful than I could have imagined. It's managed to engage people, including members of my own family, in ways most of the rest of my public education information efforts just don't achieve. It depends not only on James's expertise as a broadcaster and professional facilitator, but on his genuine willingness to go places that others avoid. Hopefully this book conveys some of the joy that we experience while producing the podcast. While a book is a different thing, we've tried to still convey the engaged discourse of the live segments. We've added, however, more specific reflections on how the mind and body really work. The body clock chapter, for example. How emotions, thoughts and feelings really interact, and what works to achieve long-term changes. Most weeks I have some media, political or health official turn around to me and say, "Ian, it's really true that our mental health is actually more important to our quality of life than our physical health." "Yes," I reply. "That's what many people have been telling me for years." What we really need, however, is the knowledge about what's going on under the hood, and what we can all really do each day to improve our own and our collective mental health.